Auburn is not a place, it is a people. The loveliest village on the plains is more than a college sports venue, more than a university filled with historic buildings, more than a quaint little southern town. Its worth lies within its people, those that call Auburn home, whether that be for a single day at a time or for a lifetime. Much like our legendary Toomer's oak trees, our stories are the product of a firm foundation laid in the beginning of our Auburn story. These are the stories of the Auburn family. These are their roots.
War Eagle Auburn family, and welcome back to Auburn Roots. This is our journey of exploring and sharing the stories of your Auburn family members. This is episode 24. We have a brand new guest on to tell us about what is the Auburn experience for them. Everything from sports, anything really that's orange and blue. They're here to talk to us about that today. My guest today, I'm proud to announce, is Mr. Richard Stevens. Richard, thank you so much for joining us on Auburn Roots.
It is my pleasure to be here.
I am thrilled to talk about, obviously, your personal story. For those that may be familiar with your name and your family legacy, there's probably some exciting things that we can discuss alongside that, and we'll get to those as they come up today. But there's always something new and interesting that I learn from people's Auburn story, and makes me even more prouder to be an Auburn family member as we go throughout talking about your journey here. So to open up today, I guess what I always like to start off with people is to tell me a little bit about yourself outside of Auburn. If you were going to put Richard into a nutshell outside of Auburn and tell who I am, what would you say to people?
Oh, well, I hadn't really thought about that. I live here in Montgomery, Alabama. Have lived here my whole life, married. I have 4 kids, 1 in college at the University of Montevallo and 3 in high school. And I work the state banking department. I formerly was a bank examiner, traveled on the road pretty extensively, but it's been about 10 or 11 years now. Have been working in our office in Montgomery.
I have a lot of ties to Montgomery. I was born and raised there and moved away and came back. We often called Montgomery like a black hole in the solar system because it just sucks you back in and you can't get away from it.
I tried to get away a couple times and got out for about 3 months once, and ended up getting transferred right back. So I've made peace with that now.
You know, it's one of those things. I think once you realize this is where I'm supposed to be, it is obviously a great place to live, and I obviously have family there still, and so I never try to make fun of it too much, but it's always one of those funny details I always like to bring up when I get a chance to talk to someone from Montgomery, or the Gump as they call it. Yes.
Well, my parents live here, and my mother still, and my wife's parents too. So it's home.
It is definitely a place. Wherever you make your home, wherever your family is, that is going to be home for you. But here's the thing that I always like to kind of talk about with people about, especially where they currently live and maybe even where they grew up at, the Auburn, Alabama, or the Auburn rival dynamic. You know, what's it like being an Auburn fan in Montgomery for you? I think a lot of people will be able to connect with that because there's probably a good population of this audience that is from Montgomery, or at least the surrounding area. But if you had to describe being an Auburn fan in Montgomery, what's that like?
I think it's fantastic. I remember growing up as a kid, and we struggled with that rivalry there during that time. And I remember when we won that 17-16 game, and then the kids coming back the next year saying 35-0. I mean, that just still, I remember it like it was yesterday. But I work with a lot of good Auburn fans, and I work with a lot of good Alabama fans as well. I see people making a lot about the Auburn-Georgia rivalry, and I always enjoyed that rivalry. Mm-hmm. But I don't know any Georgia fans.
Right.
I know Alabama fans, and I know Auburn fans. That's who I live around, so that's the rivalry to me.
It's funny that you brought that up because I think personally this is a newer phenomenon within the Auburn and Georgia fan bases, that we've always been big rivals. The history is there. No one's going to argue that, but the intensity of it has kind of gone up a level. And I'm still trying to figure out why that is. I actually currently live outside of Atlanta, and even here I'm like, yeah, of course I'll, have fun little jabs with them, but it's nothing like the Auburn and Alabama rivalry and having to live in a state with the opposite fan base for 365 days, especially after you lose that rivalry in football. That's not something that you can really compete with. So it's funny that you brought that up. I honestly don't get it, even still living here in Georgia, why that intensity has gone up.
I loved going to the Georgia game back when I was in school. I just thought it was tremendous fun, and it kind of makes me sad to think that it's gotten a little uglier.
Yeah,
over the years.
Not sure why that is. Maybe we'll figure it out somewhere down the line. But no matter how ugly that one might get, it can't beat sometimes the ferocity that comes with being in the state of Alabama. Speaking of which, and kind of going back to Montgomery, in your opinion, what's the breakdown of Auburn to Alabama fans in Montgomery, if you had to put a percentage on it?
It's probably a little heavier Alabama than Auburn, but I think it's evened up over the past decade or two, and maybe 60-40, something like that. You've got the Alabama fans that have no connection whatsoever to Alabama that just choose to be fans. But I think among the real fans who have some connection, it's fairly even, at least among the people I'm around most of the time.
I do agree with you that when I go back to Montgomery, it does seem that you see more and more Auburn. And I kind of wonder, is that because, Auburn is becoming such a popular place to move back to start raising a family, and it's getting too crowded there, it feels like at times, even though it's such a small little village. So Montgomery is like the next logical choice, the next big city for people to move to. So that could be kind of what you're seeing there as we'll call it the second Auburn, maybe. But enough about the city. Let's get into about your story a little bit and kind of open up with the big question. Where does the Auburn roots of Richard Stevens begin? Is it at birth? Is it some other time? You and Auburn, where do they intersect?
Well, it was not at birth. And as a child, somewhere in the 2, 3, 4-year-old range, I couldn't tell you exactly. There are pictures of me wearing University of Alabama gear.
That's a shame.
But it wasn't much longer than that. But as you know, and probably most of the people know, my father was the sports director at WSFA here in Montgomery, Carl Stevens. But he graduated from the University of Alabama because back in the 50s, that's where you went if you wanted to work in radio and television, and that's what his degree was, in radio and television. But he moved to Montgomery after college, and I'm not sure how long it was after that. Of course, he started getting to know the people at Auburn, and then he ended up hosting Coach Jordan's, weekly show, the Auburn Football Review, and just became such friends with Coach Jordan and so many other people over at Auburn that as the years wore on, the tide turned, I guess, as they would say. and, he didn't have a lot of pride in the Alabama football program because, as he said, his junior and senior years together, they won one game.
Obviously, a part of your story that people will find a lot of interest in is having Carl Stevens as your father and the connection to Coach Jordan. We look back at those times and with such nostalgia and fondness for people of my generation. We didn't know Coach Jordan on a personal level or even have a more direct connection to him. So he's looked at almost as this, just very, I'm trying to think of an appropriate word for it, but just important figure in Auburn history that we just would never be able to reach or touch. And the fact that you had a somewhat direct connection to it is something that we're very jealous of. And even though your dad had some ties to Alabama, now, was there any time in your childhood that you considered a switch to an Alabama or anything like that?
Well, that's funny you asked that question, because as I was finalizing where I was going to go to college, Alabama offered me a scholarship and Auburn did not. And I was sort of leaning towards maybe going to Alabama. And then I just sat down with my parents one night and I said, I don't want to go there. And they said, well, you don't have to. And like within a week, Auburn called and came through with the scholarship. So it all worked out in the end. But there was a little glimmer there where I thought I might. But I was in the band in high school, and just, I would go to the Auburn games with my parents and watch the band at halftime. And Daddy would give me the little brochures about the band that they passed out in the press box every week. And I just couldn't wait to get over to Auburn and be a part of the Auburn band, and just couldn't wait.
Yeah, it seems like it's something when you talk to somebody about how their Auburn fandom, how they kind of realized they were part of the Auburn family, and they were they just didn't know it, but it was a part of them. It just kind of one of those things that's in your being, and it grows over time. The more time you spend there, the more time you spend around the people to be more a fact there, it just kind of becomes a realization. This is where I belong. These are my people. This is my place. This is my home in a sense. Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of people will be able to echo with that. So that's great to hear that you kind of experienced that and realized that thankfully you didn't go to that place across the state. I get it. There were some things that could probably pull you over that direction.
I hear it's an excellent school. I don't know.
I would be great too at underwater basket weaving too, if that's all I can. I'm just kidding. We're not going to take shots at Alabama the entire time here. But what are some childhood memories that you had of being an Auburn fan, growing up as the son of Carl Stevens? What are some things that you remember about that?
Well, I have a very, very vague recollection of going to some sort of function at Coach Jordan's house. And I just have, again, my memory of him may be more what I've seen on TV than what I actually experienced, but I just see him as this grandfatherly figure with that gentle Selma accent that he had. And another highlight of a few years later, my childhood, was being at the game where they renamed Cliff Hare Stadium to Jordan Hare Stadium after him. He was the only coach in the nation, I believe, that was actively coaching that had a stadium named after him. So it was an honor to be there that day. So
do you think, what if you had to pinpoint what made Coach Jordan such a great coach, but a great person as well, a leader in a sense, from what you were able to grasp during the time that you had some exposure to him, what do you think, from what you saw, made him such a great leader?
I don't know that I could really say, and I remember so little of him, but I just remember him as so gentlemanly, and that's the one thing that sticks in my mind about him.
And do you think, what about your father and his relationship? What was that like? Do you have any recollection about that?
I've heard him talk about it, and just the respect that they had for each other. And he said, win or lose, Coach would show up to do the coach's show and say, Carl, you just ask me anything you want to. And just a genuine respect and admiration for each other. And I think they really enjoyed each other's company.
Mm-hmm. And it's great when you find, two people that, have that mutual respect for each other. And it obviously was very easy to like Coach Jordan with how open he was, how, as you described him, gentle. And, I remember from a press conference in the modern era, the sign that was in the back of the room, and I forget which press conference it was and which head coach, but there was this sign that said quiet strength. And to me, from what I'm able to grasp from the memory, or from the, the images that I've seen, the few clips and things like that, that's kind of what Coach Jordan to me symbolizes, is quiet strength.
I think that's well put. I do.
And I think it's something that we really resonate here within the Auburn family. We're very proud, but sometimes it's a quiet proud, because, and I'm not talking about in the stands. We're loud and we're proud.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
There's a certain level of, we'll call it humility at times. Now, not humility when it comes to, having fun with the Alabama fans, but get into that too much here. But, that's some great memories, I'm sure, that you have of being the son of a father who got that type of exposure, not only to the Auburn fan base, the Auburn sports atmosphere, but also just sports in general. Did you have any other memories or anything that you kind of have because of the opportunities that your dad had in terms of the sports field?
I can't say I remember a whole lot of that kind of stuff. I know we went to some Braves games and those kinds of things, but I don't have a strong recollection of that. It's funny. I remember going with him to like track meets at Garrett Coliseum in Montgomery, but I don't know anything about them. I don't know if it was high school or I don't. I just remember going to track meets because he was covering track meets. But it was real nice. He was, doing the sports like that. He didn't go to work in the mornings, so we would, he'd be home with the kids, and we'd go swimming or whatever, and then he'd go into work around lunchtime and work all afternoon, come home for dinner and after the news, and go back and do the 10 o'clock news. So just tremendous quality family time.
I didn't realize that would have been the schedule for someone in his position. I've always kind of wondered that. Do these people that work at the TV stations, do they just stay there the entire time, or when do they get to go home and spend time with their family? When do they eat? So that's some great insight there that I personally wasn't aware of what type of schedule he has, and I can imagine that you two, that your family had some great memories of the time you got to spend with a little bit of that flexibility there. We mentioned a little bit already about how you got to Auburn. You had thought for a moment that you might go to that other school.
Uh-huh.
Thankfully, Auburn did come through and, offer an opportunity for you to come there. So is that the simplest, is that how it kind of all shook out there? Or was there any other story behind you coming to Auburn?
No, that's pretty much it. That's where I wanted to be. It really was. And it certainly worked out for the best.
Now, do you have a plan when you're going to Auburn, you're ready to arrive there? Do you have a plan of what you're going to study, what you're going to be getting involved in there? Or did you kind of come in with arms wide open, ready to just take on the world?
I had a plan, but like they say, battle plans, once the battle actually starts, the plans are out the window. I started out thinking I might major in engineering, and within a year or so, I realized I probably wasn't going to apply myself to my studies quite strongly enough for that, and ended up a business major, and still wasn't the greatest student, but I guess it turned out okay.
Yeah, I think you worked out great for yourself.
Got my degree. I worked for Central Bank in Montgomery for several years before I started and went to work with the state, and it's been a really great career. So,
yeah, it's not an uncommon story that I've heard that a lot of people went to Auburn with the plans of becoming an engineer, and whether it's because of time it takes or the desire to actually complete the program, I've heard a lot of people's like, well, yeah, I was going to be an engineer, but then Auburn kind of beat it out of me. So it sounds like the engineering program was as tough as it is today.
I'm not going to blame it on Auburn. It was it was me, but I this might not be the right way to go about it, but I really, really did want to get over there and play in the marching band. Mm-hmm. And I got to do that. So
talk to me a little bit about that marching band experience. Did you start right away when you first arrived? Did you have to work your way into it, or what was that experience like? Oh, goodness,
no. I moved in to Magnolia Dorm, I think a week and a half or 2 weeks before classes started. On my hall, there was me and one guy who was there for ROTC. And we were there for band camp because, school didn't start till late September because we were on the quarter system. So you had a couple of games before the band even got together. Mm-hmm. And but then so it was a lonesome time. I got over there, freshman in college all by myself in the dorm. But there wasn't much time for being lonely because in band camp, it was from sun up till late at night every day. And I didn't love every minute of it. I sure loved it overall.
I find personally, whether it be some other athletics analogy I can make there, the things that sometimes were the hardest at the time, we look back at the most fond of our memories. I can think back in my life, two-a-days in football. in high school, hated it at the time, but there's not a day that goes by that I wouldn't give for just one more day of two-a-days just to know that I could put the shoulder pads back on. And I can imagine it's probably the same for you. Band camp, I'm sure, was very tough. I had one, my parents decided that that I was going to be in the band, not that I got to decide it, and put me through 1 year of band. I always say to that band director, he was a saint for being willing to put up with me, a guy who had no musical talents, but I got an appreciation for what you have to go through at band camp. For those people that may not have that experience, can you kind of describe a little bit what the Auburn band camp preparation to actually go out in the field is like?
Well, I don't have any idea what it's like now, but back then, I just remember sitting there in that band room for that first rehearsal. Again, a little freshman, I played the trombone, sitting in that room that's crammed full of people, 350 or whatever, people getting ready to play. And we didn't warm up or anything. Dr. Walls came up, talked to us for a few minutes, and said, all right, everybody get up, War Eagle, up to, ready, go. And we started, and I'm not sure I played a single note. It was the loudest and fastest thing I'd ever heard. I was completely blown away by it. It was amazing. But it was a tough week, We'd practice indoors some on the music and a lot of marching practice outside and a lot of running too. It was, start doing a show and if something messed up, you'd have to start over and you were expected to run back to the beginning. I was probably in the best shape of my life between that and walking to class back in the day.
I think few people realize that you do have to have some conditioning to do all of this, and that you do get quite a workout holding up instruments and maintaining good posture and all that stuff. It can get very tiring. And for the 1 year that I did it in high school, I was like, that's enough for me. So for you to go through a collegiate marching band experience and one that's as proud and as storied as Auburn, I can't even imagine what it would have been like for you. And I was a wimp that could hardly take 1 year of it.
Well, I managed to stretch it into 5 years. I graduated in December. So I had 5 marching seasons and was a trombone section leader that 5th and final year. So I was real proud of that.
Now, it's funny you mentioned you stretched it into 5 years. So now, was that because you needed extra time to finish up those credits, or was it just you loved Auburn so much that you didn't want to leave?
It got down to I could take a really, really heavy load and get out on time, or I could stretch it out an extra quarter, go over the summer, take a lighter load. I was working part-time at a movie theater over there, so it just made sense to not push it so hard. And getting that extra marching band season was a great benefit.
I think students, when people ask or I talk to them about what college experience is like, I always encourage them, obviously take your studies very seriously because you're there, you're paying money, or someone's offered you a scholarship to be there. So take that seriously, but find a way to, have the experiences, because this is going to be some of the most, memorable times of your life. And I can say that for myself, and so many others can as well. We talked a lot about band and starting off as an engineering student, moving on to business. What are some other things that you remember about campus life during the 80s or the early to mid 80s?
I just remember, I don't know why this thought popped into my head, but how cold and dark it could be on that campus during winter quarters. That first year, winter quarter, I think I ended up with a chemistry lab from 3 to 6 on Fridays. And you want to talk about a cold, dark, deserted place, walking back to the dorm at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening. There was nobody there. But I also remember the excitement of heading across campus for a pep rally on Thursday night or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, obviously we'll call them pep rallies now in some sense of the word, and those type of memories as well. But there's something that almost seems more fond about what I guess it's part of me not having been around to experience that. I was born in 87, so I didn't see the 80s for Auburn, and in some sense I was too young to remember any of that. But there's something fond about thinking back to that time and the things that you were experiencing there. You're there in the middle of the Pat Dye era, for crying out loud.
not just that, my freshman year in the Auburn band, that was the bow over the top year at Legion Field, where we broke the streak of 9, 10 years of losing to Alabama. So it was an incredible time to be there. Bowl games every season. It was fantastic.
And you got to see probably two of the greatest eras in Auburn history, the rise of the Pat Dye times at Auburn. But you also saw the kind of I'll call it not the tail end, but the ending years of the Shug Jordan era. Do you not necessarily value, but do you look back on one of those eras more fondly than the other? I know you've got your college experience for Pat Dye and kind of childhood and the connections with Shug Jordan growing up. Is there any comparison there with the two of them?
Well, I don't have as many memories of the Jordan days. I went to a number of games every year with my family, but by the time I was in high school and really was starting to get into knowing what was going on and being into it, we went through the Barfield years and then the beginning of the Dye years. So it's more the Dye than anything else. But I want to touch back on something else you said about the college experience and experiencing things, because I never went to a basketball game when I was in high school. I don't know why, I just didn't. That wasn't something me or my friends did. But I played in the basketball pep band my freshman year at Auburn. And of course, that was Charles Barkley, Chuck Persons, and that group then. And I just absolutely fell in love with basketball then as well. And every now and then I might have wandered across campus and strolled into a baseball game and really experienced some things that I had not paid that much attention to in years past, and really enjoyed them.
It's funny, sometimes people, when they think of Auburn, and rightfully so, you think of football. And I always try to describe it this way, the engine in some sense that drives Auburn is football, but there's many other parts to the car that make it move. And an engine is just an engine without the other parts. And,
Sure.
Whether that's sports, the academics of Auburn, just the Auburn life outside of that, of just being part of a much larger family. I tried to always kind of subscribe to the way that David Housel described it as the whole of the Auburn experience.
Right. And David and my father were just absolutely best friends. So I've mentioned having met Coach Jordan a couple of times, but I've spent a lot of time with the Housels and have really cherished that friendship as well.
Can you tell me any insight into David Housel? He just seems like a wealth of Auburn knowledge.
Oh, I can't imagine the depths of his Auburn knowledge. I can't, which kind of leads me in a completely different direction. My father not only did the coaches show with Coach Jordan, but he was the PA announcer at Jordan Hare Stadium for a lot of years. I don't know, 25 years or so. And he had one of his coworkers at WSFA, Roger Thomas, worked as his spotter in the press box for football. And Roger could tell you the score, I think, of every football game he had ever been to, how they scored, who scored. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I could get to the car sometimes and can't remember exactly what the score was.
That sounds like an engineering brain if I've ever heard one right there. I don't know if he's an engineer by trade, but someone that can, recollect all that type of stuff. That's someone that needs to be in engineering.
Phenomenal.
I personally, would just love to. I wish sometimes that David Housel would just teach a course on Auburn history, everything, sports, the whole thing. And I'd pay good money to sit in on that.
He and his wife and my parents went to a lot of Broadway plays in Atlanta, particularly, and every now and then, one of the other couples that usually went with them wouldn't get to go, and they'd offer me a couple of tickets, and I'd get to go with them too. And so I spent time over there with them doing stuff like that, and just seeing them on game days and that kind of stuff.
So let me go ahead and put this down on the checklist. You got to spend time with Coach Jordan, or at least had some family connections to him. You got to spend time with the Housels. You were there during the Pat Dye years, and you experienced
Yeah,
Bo over
okay.
the top. What a checklist so far, my friend. That is a good one right there. And hear me out. I've had my share of great Auburn experiences, but I continue to find that I am more and more jealous of people as time goes on, especially when I hear about their times when they were students at Auburn. And you have a very a story that makes me very, very envious here. So you graduated in '86.
Yes.
Got your Auburn degree in hand. You mentioned that you went into the banking world in Montgomery right after that. Did you remove yourself from Auburn for a time, or did you kind of keep connected to it? How did life go out after graduation?
Oh no, I stayed fairly well connected to it. I started buying my own season tickets right away instead of using my dad's tickets every week, and we stayed pretty regularly in touch. And I tell you, friends I've made, through the band and whatnot over there, just through my whole life, I've stayed close with those people.
And I would imagine that those bonds have only strengthened over the years. When you go through a significant part of life together, and during college, whether that be in band or classes or things like that, and when you already have the connection that's built around the Auburn family concept, I think that only makes it so much better. So I know that one thing that many people will know about you is that you work up in the press box.
Yes.
For the football games. When did that come about? How did that come about? Tell me a little about that.
I guess that's one of those, it's all about who you know situations. Like I said, I bought season tickets for a number of years, but my wife expressed a fundamental difference one time, and I realized that forcing her to go to all the games with me might not be the best thing to do. She said one time, "I don't really mind going. I just hate that it wastes a whole day." And my thought was, what better way to spend a whole day? And I thought, okay, and so I started talking to my dad, and he said, why don't I see if I could get you to come help us up in the press box? You could answer the phone. There's, a number of things you could do to help us up there. I'll see if I can't get you up there. So I started helping out in the press box. I'd answer the phone, and, I'd take down scores back when they used to announce scores, and people would bring in announcements and that kind of stuff, and I'd try to kind of help him keep up with where he was on that kind of stuff. So I did that a little bit, and then the gentleman that worked the scoreboard one day, I think his daughter was a cheerleader at Vanderbilt, and they were having a parents' day there, but it was an Auburn home game, but he wanted to go be with his daughter, so he said, "Hey, Richard, if I show you how to do this, would you like to do this in a few weeks at such and such game?" I was like, "Oh, I would love to, So that's always been something I wanted to do. So he worked with me on how to run the scoreboard, and so that week, a few weeks later, came and went, and it all went well. And from then on, about one game a year or so, I would fill in, or even every now and then he'd just have me do a quarter, just so I would keep doing it. And then so after Daddy decided he wasn't going to announce anymore, and Rick was going to be taking over, I reached out to Rick Smith and said, "Hey, my dad's been doing this forever, and I've helped out up there, and I think maybe I could be helpful to y'all as well." And he was like, "Oh, absolutely. Please come help us." And so I worked a couple of years just doing the same kind of thing, answering the phone, helping with announcements with Rick Smith. And then I got a call before football season one year, and the guy who had been running the scoreboard before was having some health problems, and he said, "I'm not going to be able to do that anymore." And I told him, "You should be the one to do it, so you should be expecting a phone call about that." And sure enough, so I've been doing it ever since.
I guess my first reaction to that is, in my mind, it's one thing to run the scoreboard for a high school or a rec league game, but you're running the scoreboard for the Auburn Tigers. That's got to be nerve-wracking, or was it for you at all?
Yeah, it was at first. And just to be clear, that big TV with the Jumbotron and all that kind of stuff, I'm not doing all that. That's handled out of a television production studio. I'm doing the kind of stuff you would do at a high school game, putting in the down and distance, the scores. A lot of people accuse me of messing up the clock. And I say, the referees run the clock. I fix it when they ask me to. I don't run it. When they say, please put 1 second back on the clock, I do that.
Well, now we've got some clarification on that. So now when you're at an Auburn game that it is not Richard's fault when they need time back on the. He's actually fixing the problem. But look, we all know that the refs, they're kind of the scapegoats. We all get mad at them anyway. If anything, it's the red hat guy. If he's still even out,
that is annoying. Nothing breaks the momentum of a game like the red hat guy stepping out on the field.
So you're running this board. Is it bigger? Is it more complicated than a high school or just a basic kind of rec league type of situation?
Well, honestly, I've never really done that, so I don't know. But I think it's got to be pretty much the exact same thing because it's the exact same information you're putting in. And so when it says, 2nd and 8 up on the scoreboard and you see that big official 2nd and 8, it's just me looking out the window going, it looks like about 8.
I've often wondered, I know that, for the radio announcers, they'll have spotters to try to help them out. But I've always wondered, you got to have a good eye to be able to guesstimate, what the down and distance looks like.
I'm kind of down near the south end of the field. So if they're up in that northeast corner, it gets kind of hard to see sometimes.
And I would imagine, are you using binoculars?
I have binoculars, but I really don't use them for spotting the ball. I do it with my naked eye. And for the first several years, I was sitting with Rick and his spotter, so we would talk about it as well. But the way they've reconfigured it up there, I'm in a booth pretty much all by myself, so I don't have that opportunity to talk about it anymore.
Right. So you've had the experience of not only your father working on the PA and getting to spend some time up there, but now later in life you've gotten the opportunity, and of course, like as you admitted, sometimes it is who you know, but you have to seize those opportunities when they come to you. Luck, as people say, is where preparation meets opportunity.
All right.
And it seems like that's the case here. Sometimes you just have to take advantage of those special opportunities that you're given, and you did that. Can you think through time being up there with your dad and now your time since then, special moments that stick out being in the press box up there?
Well, obviously the whole 2010 season was just a magical time to be doing that. And, I remember A-Day the previous year, I'd come back to work and everybody's, well, what about that kid Cam Newton? And I was like, he's big and strong, but he didn't seem like he had any touch on his passes. I don't know. Didn't look that impressive. Well, he grew into it, I guess. That and Rick was announcing by then, not my father, but my dad came to several of the games. And then when it rolled around to the national championship game, a lot of people, are you going to go to that game? You're going, right? You're going. I was like, no, I'm going to go over to my dad's house and watch it with him. And that is a special memory to me. That night when Auburn won the national championship, and I was there watching it at my dad's house with him, and had a couple of my kids with me, and it was just a very, very special night.
And see, I love stories like that because obviously it's special to be at the games. It's obviously special to experience that atmosphere.
And let me just add to that too. I just said I was in the band at Auburn, but my younger sister was a cheerleader at Auburn as well. Not at the same time, but right after I graduated, she became a cheerleader. So she was a cheerleader for 2 or 3 years as well. So as I was growing up, my dad, became more and more of an Auburn fan as he got to know the people at Auburn. And Auburn's closer to Montgomery, so the relationships formed. But he still went both, he pulled for Alabama if they weren't playing for Auburn. He got leaned more and more toward Auburn. But by the time I went over there and got in the band, and he became the band announcer during that time as well, and my sister was a cheerleader, it was all over then. He was 100% Auburn from then on. And so it was so special, because I think Alabama had won the national championship the year before. And the feeling I had was just, why is it always them? Why is it never us?
Mm-hmm.
And then we won it that next year. And it was like, even since we haven't won one since then, it made it okay that we won that one. I was like, finally. And my dad enjoyed it just as much as any other Auburn fan did.
Yeah, I was going to say that, I think the greatest experiences are not necessarily where you are, but who you're with during that time, whether it's in the stadium, in a living room. I'll never forget where I was in downtown Auburn at what was called the Auburn Baptist Campus Ministries, and I'll never forget storming the streets, with everybody else. One of the first ones there. I even made a makeshift flag out of a broomstick and an Auburn flag that was hanging up there, and just ran down the street with it. So, it would have been great. I'm sure you and I would have loved the opportunity to have been there, but the special memories that you'll have with your father, with all his history, with this program, with this university, made that even more special for you. Any other things that stick out of your time so far working in the press box, bigger games or special moments, special people you've gotten to meet?
I don't really have a lot of time for meeting folks up there. And it's kind of funny too. People often will ask me, especially early in the season, how so-and-so looked. And it's like, a lot of times I don't know who's in the game, who's running the ball, whatnot, because I'm so focused on what I'm supposed to be doing. It does take a fair amount of focus to keep up with that for the whole game. And I'll tell you, of course, my other special claim to fame was adding the second back that Coach Saban was so adamant about there being a second left on the clock, and then Chris Davis running that ball back. That was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And to be standing there looking, seeing it happen, and then you're looking, there's no flags out there anywhere. Am I really going to push this home team touchdown button? I mean, is that what actually just happened? And then I did it.
See, it's one thing for us, and I'll admit I was in the stands that night. It's one thing for us to watch it happen, but you're actually making it reality by pushing that button over. Touchdown, Auburn, game over. In essence, you are the one that took down Alabama.
Well,
you made it a reality.
Exactly, but but I did get to push that button. And the thing was, I thought Auburn, it was a tie game. We were going to go to overtime. It wasn't like, Alabama wasn't going to make that field goal.
Right.
And, if they had, it'd been a thing. But I just knew we were going to overtime. I had the scoreboard and everything all set up for overtime. And they said 1 second back on the clock. I'm like, oh, great. Okay, well, how many timeouts did everybody have left? Because I got to put that back up there. And
I wish,
I thought our better chance, we had the momentum. I thought we would win in overtime.
It did feel that way at the time, but in a game of that magnitude at that moment, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I felt personally, because I was on campus basically for that whole weekend, there was an electricity that was in the air around campus from Friday and still obviously into Sunday after that fact.
No, I think so. And it, it harkens back to that 1989 first time ever at Jordan Hare, and the electricity that was in the air that day was just, you could feel it. It was unreal. I think it was very similar.
And the views that you've had of obviously great games like that, but just, even the more, simpler times, just basic games where Auburn was supposed to win. I can imagine there are many people that would love to be sitting where you are. Obviously very nervous about working a scoreboard if they were them, but that'd be my big thing is here. I'm going to mess something up. If you don't have to share it, if you don't want to, but have there been any funny mess ups that you've had working the scoreboard?
I don't know about funny. I know one time at A-Day, I left it on third quarter, almost all the way through the fourth quarter. But nobody noticed that was, I don't think anybody was paying any attention by then. I'm not perfect, and I do make mistakes, and just try to get them corrected as quickly as I can. And
Yeah.
Like anybody else.
Yeah. Do you think you'll ever be
What's
able
funny to me is doing the down and distance and watching the officials out there. It's funny how, and I've never been an official. I don't really know how it works, but it's funny how casual and loose it seems to be with where they put the ball between plays, and all of a sudden it gets down close to the first down, and they're measuring to the fraction of a millimeter when it can go, a foot or two back and forth on an incomplete pass, and nobody ever says anything.
And it seems that they're a little bit more loose and free with certain teams.
I'm not going there. I think we're all just doing the best we can, But I'll try to watch them one time, and I think they're spotting the ball with one foot, and then they put it by the other foot, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, that's why I went there for you, so you wouldn't have to be put in that position. That's an experience that I think many of us would love to see, and be a part of. Do you think that you'll, when the time is done that you are working the scoreboard, do you think it'll feel the same, or will you miss it, or how do you think that transition will happen for you?
Well, I really don't know. I have taken my kids to some games over there, and I don't get to enjoy it with them. I've had them up there to show them what I do, but then when the game starts, they've got to leave, and so that's one thing. Is we've had the Camellia Bowl and Montgomery Bowl start up here in town, and so my son and I have gone to that a number of times just because I want to go to a game with him, and I don't get to do that at Auburn. We did go to the Birmingham Bowl when Auburn played there because I want to watch an Auburn game with him sometimes.
And it's much different watching the game as opposed to working the game. You're invested in a different way. You're having to be focused in some other areas where the rest of us are losing our minds on a 109 kickoff or missed kick return. You're having to focus on, do I push this button or not to actually make this legitimate? And,
well, make no mistake, as soon as I pushed that button, I pretty much went just as nuts as everybody else.
Hey, I've seen the videos of the press box. I don't know if I actually saw you in those videos at all, but if you went half as crazy as everybody else, and everybody should have, I'm sure you had a great old time after you were done with your responsibilities.
Absolutely.
So, I don't want to sit here and say that we've covered every aspect of your Auburn story. Everybody's story is deep and wide and has all these special things. Is there anything, that you would like to share from your Auburn roots that we haven't touched on before we kind of move into the final phase of your episode?
I can't think of anything in particular right off. We've covered a lot of different areas here.
So I guess before we go into what's called the final questionnaire, the not so rapid fire questions, what does the Auburn family mean to you? And I know that's a very deep, broad question, but what does it mean to you?
Well, I don't think it is. I mean, it's family. That's what it means. It's everything that word means. It's family.
So let's move in to the not so rapid fire questions. If you're ready for those, I got 12 this or that type of question favorite. Everybody hates me after this, so I hope that's not the case because I make you choose some things sometimes. Feel free to explain yourself. I might have to ask some explanations sometimes on a few of these, but if you're ready, we'll get started.
I'm as ready as I'm going to get.
I promise it's not that bad. The previous contestants in this, they always get nervous, but they always do a great job. So question number one, and not so rapid fire questions. Number one, orange or blue?
Blue.
Any reason why?
I love I think the orange sets off the blue well. The blue makes the orange makes the blue look good. But I think too much orange is not, I like the blue.
Too much orange, then you're Clemson, it feels like.
Yeah, right.
Question two, here's a tough one. Aubie or War Eagle?
Well, now this is one that I have actually given some thought to. And I got to go with War Eagle, just because that is so flipping cool. Mm-hmm. An actual live eagle that flies around is just amazing. I love Aubie. I absolutely love Aubie. Aubie, came into being not too long before I arrived on campus. And I think it's the most amazing mascot out there. But the eagle, I mean, that's something special.
Have you had an opportunity to meet them up close before?
I've been pretty close. Yeah. It's even more awesome the closer you get.
I was going to say, you know,
But yeah, me and my son had our picture made with one of the Eagles at a basketball game a year or two ago.
You get an appreciation for how powerful and in a way potentially dangerous these animals are.
Absolutely.
And the level of training it takes for them to do this is absolutely incredible. And so, you know, it's always fun to have that conversation with no matter who the opposing fan is, even if, especially when there's someone that's like distantly removed. I can remember having a discussion with Washington fans when we played them in an opening game. It's like, all right, tell me, are y'all Tigers or are y'all Eagles? I'm like, it's not, you know, you have to go through the whole spiel again.
Yeah.
But as confusing as they say they are, about it, they can't deny the awesomeness that is seeing an eagle fly with 87,000 people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question 3, what's your favorite part of the Auburn fight song? It can be a word, a phrase, an entire line, but favorite part of the Auburn fight song?
I'm going to have to sing the whole thing to myself to, I think favorite part is going to have to be ever to conquer, never to yield.
I love that part.
A part of it to me is the give 'em hell, because I remember as a kid somewhere in a program or something seeing the words, and it said, hit 'em high, hit 'em low.
Mm-hmm.
And then many years later, I was introduced to the give 'em hell version.
the quote unquote adult version of it.
Yeah.
I always hear stories about people saying that's the first time they got to cuss.
Yeah, definitely.
Those are two great parts of the Auburn fight song. Question 4 for you. I think this might be an obvious answer, but we'll see. Your favorite Auburn athletics program of all time?
No, it's football.
Yeah, I think it would probably be hard for you to be pushed to pick anything other than that, especially with your history and your family's history with that program. Question 5. Your favorite Auburn athlete of all time?
Oh, that's tough. It's I'm going to go with Bo Jackson.
I'm assuming that has mostly to do with being there during your college years and getting to be getting to be a part of that time.
But then, Charles Barkley, I just love Charles. And he actually lived across the hall from me in the dorm for a week or two while they were doing some renovations at the athletic dorm or something. And it was just as cordial as he could be. And so many other greats too, but I'm going to go with Bo.
I can imagine what it was like to maybe see him walking down the hall, that giant man.
There was like a window at the end of the hall, and he would come out of the room, and it would just block out all the light.
And you're like, you probably the first time it happens, you're like, okay, what's going on? The second time it happens, you're like, Charles, is that you?
Yeah, and I'm just a little short guy, so very impressive.
Oh, I would love to see the height differential there because I know how much I've stood by him before I know the differential for just me alone. So that'd be funny to see. Question 6 for you. Your favorite. Yeah, already. It's not so bad, right? Your favorite Auburn coach of all time?
Sonny Smith.
Now, I find that interesting with your family's connections to Coach Jordan. Why Sonny Smith? And I'm not disagreeing. I'm just interested in it.
Well, I didn't really know Coach Jordan. I mean, right. I had a few experiences with him, but I was very young. But Sonny Smith was the coach when I was in the basketball pep band, and he seemed to really appreciate us. And again, that was when I really fell in love with basketball too. And now to be able to listen to him on the radio, and I was friends with his daughter when we were in school, and just he's my favorite.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'll send a reminder for the listeners of this episode. We actually interviewed Coach Sonny Smith and let him tell his Auburn roots on episode 15. And I think what you were kind of describing there with how grateful he was to you guys as the pet band, I got a sense, and we build up these guys in our head, right? That they're larger than life. And, you forget that they're just people like us. What I got a sense from Coach Smith is, he's just grateful that the Auburn family accepted him. And I think that's a testament to, how special of a coach and how special of a member of the Auburn family that he is. So I love that you picked him. Question 7. Your favorite Auburn non-athletics person. So this can be anyone that's not a coach, a athlete, someone directly connected with the Auburn athletics programs in any way. But your favorite Auburn person.
Well, goodness, I don't even know where to go with that.
Usually I give people hints, family members, friends, professors, people you knew in college. That's usually the route people go, and they kind of think of this.
Yeah, well, obviously, there's my dad.
That's a big one.
He was tied in with athletics. But I did have some great professors over there. One that stands out was Ford Laumer in the marketing department. I have so many fantastic people over there, but most of them I have come to know through athletics.
It's probably hard for someone like you with y'all's history to break away from that.
and then to think, as I start, this question had not occurred to me, but then I think back, the band directors, Bill Walls and Johnny Vinson were the band directors when I was there, and just so tremendous amount of respect for these people.
Yeah. Question 8. Your favorite Auburn building can be on campus or off campus, but your favorite Auburn building.
My favorite building, at least one of them, would have been Foy Union, the Union building back in the day, where you had the War Eagle cafeteria downstairs there and the ballroom upstairs where there were events periodically. I saw Louis Grizzard there one time and actually went backstage and talked to him. That was a building where I spent a lot of time, a lot of free time. Didn't have classes, but enjoyed my time there.
And I think those are great, opportunities, those type of buildings. Obviously now, I believe it's called the Melton Student Union, after Harold Melton. I knew it just as the Auburn Student Union when I was on campus. But those are great places, obviously, where you can continue to build the whole of the Auburn experience, whether you're just getting food, because we all know every college student's starving.
Right.
But you're going to, dances and concerts and just meetups. And, there's always people there trying to get you involved in this activity. And, one of the funny things that I always remember my time on campus is going across the quad, trying to avoid everybody trying to get you to sign up to do something.
Oh, right.
I don't know if you had that experience.
Oh, sure.
But that happened in the student union as well for us. So the student union for Old Foy, as we call it, I hope that they figure out something more to do with it in the future. And I hope they can kind of retain some of the history of it too. Because right now it's just kind of sitting there, used for a multi-purpose thing. Question 9, your favorite Auburn place to eat?
Well, gosh. And I really don't eat over there much anymore, but I lived in an apartment right over by Guthrie's, and I loved Guthrie's, and I ate there all the time when I was in school.
Now, are we talking on the one on Opelika Road? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. I think it was Arcadia Apartments, just right there by it. And my roommates and I would walk over there all the time.
And now, before they tore it down, that was a frequent place for me as well, because I lived not in Arcadia, but very close to that. In fact, I had to pass it every day to go to class or to, go to the campus for games and stuff like that. So much money was spent at the Guthrie's alongside you. So I understand the love for it.
And we would play, we played a lot of afternoon games back then. And that was always my post-game meal was get home, get on my band uniform, get a shower, and run over to Guthrie's.
It's easy. It's fast. It's pretty good too. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and relatively cheap back then.
And every college student knows quantity for less food is the big thing that you try to get there. Question 10, your favorite Auburn tradition. So I know this can be very broad. So this can be sports or non-sports related. It can even be something that's real personal for you that nobody else would have, but your favorite Auburn tradition for yourself.
There are so many great traditions, and some I have not taken part in as much as others, like the rolling of Toomer's Corner. I've done a few times, but I haven't really been up there all that much. But I think the Tiger Walk is just a fantastic tradition. And then the Eagle Flight is a more recent tradition, but I couldn't think of anything more stirring than that.
It is something that is uniquely Auburn. And,
exactly.
It's very special.
That's part of the announcement, isn't it? In a tradition that is uniquely Auburn. Yeah.
I believe so. There's probably a reason I quoted it that way because I've had it drilled into me.
I think I've heard that before.
might have been something that I've heard a few times and just spit it out verbatim now. It's like repetition. That's a great pick though. But question 11, your favorite Auburn memory. You think of this memory when you think of Auburn.
I remember a crisp, cool autumn night walking across campus to a pep rally. And you could just hear the roar of the pep rally getting started across campus. And it was like, man, this is what I'm here for.
Mm-hmm. Can it get any better than this?
Exactly.
I can feel that picture you just painted for me. Mm-hmm. I'm there right now. So that's a great one. Your final question, describe Auburn to me in one word other than family.
Home.
Absolutely. And even though you live in Montgomery, Alabama, it will always be home in some sense.
It absolutely will.
The connections that you have are very unique. A lot of us are very jealous of them, if we're completely honest. The things that you get to see from your vantage point up there in the press box area, working the scoreboard.
I feel very honored to get the opportunity to do that. I do.
I'm sure. And just know that we're all up there just looking at you fondly while you're having some of the best views of the stadium that you'll ever have for some of the greatest moments. And, as we said, sports is a big thing that drives the car that is Auburn. It is the engine, but there's so many more experience. And as you so eloquently put it, a cool, crisp night, just walking across campus is something that can be special within the Auburn family. And the many people that you've met, the expanse of the Auburn family is deep and far and wide. And your story has been one that I've really appreciated you coming on here and sharing. So thank you so much for being willing to share with us.
Well, I very much appreciate your asking. I've enjoyed it.
And I hope that you all out there learned a little bit about his time at Auburn, his family's connections, and maybe you have a greater appreciation for how difficult it is to decide if you're going to click the thing over for a touchdown on a kick six or not. But thank you so much, Richard, for being here. And I hope that you, the listeners, have enjoyed this. We'll have many more episodes to come. Thank you for listening to episode 24. And War Eagle.
War Eagle.